Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Career Center's Fall Professional Series on thinking about graduate school, factors to consider, and how to prepare. This evening, I'm joined by one of the academic advisors from our Barron campus, Eliana Julius. So we'll get right in. So we like to begin with sharing with you the vision of the Career Center. Some of you may know this already. The goal for the Career Center is to support the leaders of tomorrow. Our idea is to have students think strategically about designing their careers while in college, at graduation, and for life. So moving past that, we want to welcome you. I know I recognize some names in the group this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. For others, this may be your first time meeting both of us. So we just wanted to share a little bit about our background. So I am Sharon Mella-Reyes. I'm one of the Associate Directors of the Career Center. I have a Bachelor's of Science from Syracuse University and a Master's of Art in Counseling from Manhattan College, and I'll turn it over to my colleague this evening.
Hi, I'm Eliana Julius, academic and pre-law advisor on Barron. I have a BA in politics from the University of San Francisco and an MSED from Baruch. And we're really excited to help you today to learn about the various factors to consider and to create a timeline for graduate school.
Great. All right.
So, 3 basic questions to ask yourself. Why do I want to go to graduate school? Perhaps you want to focus on a specific area. Perhaps you want the career of your dreams. What kind of work do I want to do in my life? Who do I look at and say, wow, he or she is having so much fun. How can I do that? And what do I need to do to get there? Are you certain your career requires a graduate degree? Perhaps you want to be a sonographer and you can take a 16-month program at a local state school. These are the questions to ask yourself and always check in with your career center.
So now we want to touch upon the reasons why we shouldn't be considering graduate school at this time. These are the factors that we consider to be of most importance. You shouldn't be attending graduate school yet if you don't want to go into the real world. You know, you're sort of stalling to make your next decision. You feel like there's nothing better to do, or maybe perhaps you're afraid to start working. I know we were speaking beforehand about this current climate that we're in right now. And I know from some of you, it may be fearful to be looking for employment in the midst of this pandemic that we're all experiencing right now. But if we're here to share with you this evening that might not be the wisest decision to attend graduate school now. Now, if you've answered yes to the questions before and you feel like there's a resounding reason to attend, then by all means, and these don't apply to you, let's move forward with this plan. But consider graduate school only if you've already committed to a career choice and if your research has indicated that graduate school is required for you to succeed in that career.
Okay, once again, considerations in selecting a graduate school. Professions that require graduate degrees: law, medicine, college professor. These are just some of them. These particular fields of interest may require a graduate degree from a ranked college or university. Now, other tracks such as nursing or accounting or engineering, you're going to follow a standardized field of study and it may not require a ranked college or university. That's something you should look into. Other types of careers, it may not require a degree from a ranked program, as you spoke about. And that's up to you. You need to do the research. Certain things that you're going into, you don't need to go to the top 5 schools. Check into the region or state where you attend. Graduate school matters. Let's say you're from Florida, but right now you're at YU. If you envision yourself making your life back home in Florida, make it easy. Apply to at least several schools in the state where you see yourself living your life. Check into urban versus rural. Do you want city? Are you okay with urban, institutional size? Do you enjoy your current courses where you have 20 kids in a class? Or are you okay with 100 to 200 students and possibly looking at the professor on a screen? Public versus private. These are two, this is very, very different. I could talk a long time on this. And I do suggest you make you make a meeting with advising as well as your career center. These are two very different tracks. Tuition costs, loans, these are the things that you really want to research. Okay. Other considerations in selecting a graduate school. Practitioner, hands-on. For example, PsyD, clinical, versus theoretical focus, PhD, theory. Career choice options once the degree is obtained. What can you do with this degree? For example, if you have a law degree, we know there are several ways to go. Depending on which degree you get, you have several career options. Safety, think about safety. Proximity to a Jewish community. This is an important one because there may be a program which is excellent. It's ranked, it's your dream program, and you may be the only Jew in that class and in that school. It's just something to think about. Access to scholarships and class size. With scholarships, I personally can't stress applying early enough because the earlier you apply, the better your chances are of securing scholarship money before it's given to somebody else. Class size, once again, you could be in a class with 20 students, or you could be in a large class like the UC system with 200 students. The other thing I want to say is, for example, if you were to go to an MBA program versus an EMBA. So an MBA program, traditional, you don't have much experience. EMBA, executive MBA, you'll have at least 5 years experience before you go and get that degree. Okay, here's one. Quality and experience of instructors. What do I mean? Who's teaching your class? Is it a TA? Is it an adjunct? Is it a professor, or is it all of the above? Who will you be learning from? Last but not least, where do graduates of a particular program get hired? You can find that data. It's not just, you can actually get data from the Career Center as to, okay, where did these students go on to?
So here are some other considerations. You should visit the campus. Now, I understand that right now that may not be feasible. However, they are providing virtual tours for some campuses. So I would advise you to take an opportunity and explore that. Talk to an admissions representative over the phone. If possible, relating back to the Career Center component, see if you would be able to be connected by an admissions representative to someone from their Career Center who may be able to highlight additional information about their graduates. If it's not something that's housed within that area, perhaps you can speak to the department of the graduate school of interest. Talk to graduates of the program that you are considering. I highly encourage you to utilize LinkedIn as a means of connecting with other alumni from those institutions. If you're not sure how to search on LinkedIn, please feel free to connect with us at the Career Center so we may be able to assist you in doing that tailored search. Network with successful people who you trust in that same profession. I'm sure many of you have connections through your family and or friends who you may speak to who may be in these professions that you have an interest to explore or go into. Talk to your favorite professors. I know some of you have strong connections to the faculty at YU. Perhaps you have a sibling who might be at a different institution or a friend who you might be able to connect to as well. And then last but not least, I would highly encourage you to connect with the Career Center to utilize our multitude of resources such as Canvas and YU MVP. On Canvas, for those of you who have spoken with me in the past or any of our members of the Career Center, the things that we want to note is that we have course documents, industry guides, and major guides for each of the majors at Yeshiva University, both at YC, Sims, and Stern. And within them, you'll be able to learn more about distinctive graduate programs, whether they are in-house at Yeshiva University or externally. We do some searching for you to identify the correct programs that align with the majors. However, there aren't always clean linear paths. There are some disciplines where you may be majoring in something completely unrelated, but your interest has peaked elsewhere. As Alana has mentioned, if you are interested in accounting, in nursing, anything within the sciences that you want to go into, there are specific prerequisites that you do need to be mindful of. So I do encourage you, when you look at these guides, do your research, look up the schools individually so that you may best familiarize yourself with the prerequisites that they may have, so that you can sit down with an academic advisor and sort of flush that out for yourselves as well.
Okay. Hints, being wise about this decision. I already know you're wise, but anyway. Schools want good alumni. What does that mean? Determine what this may mean before an interview, completing an application. For example, what are you bringing to the table? What might you be bringing to the class? Will you give back in time or money? Make evidence-based decisions, not emotional ones. What I mean by that is that we all hear from our parents, our grandparents, our friends, respectfully so, we can hear their advice. But I'm asking you to research your program, research, and find out what it is and what it's going to take. And if this field is viable, if this field is what it was 20 years ago, how has the field changed? What is it like now? Are you sacrificing too much? Okay, revisit the decision more than once. Often we're going to get very excited, we're going to make our decision, and everybody's backing us, and we think we know what we want. And the next day we wake up and we're not so sure. And that's why I'm here to say intuition is everything. Revisit the decision. Talk to your academic advisor about prerequisites and your transcripts, and possibly taking a gap year. One of the things I do that I truly enjoy is I work with a student, and whatever major they have, we make sure to get the prereqs in. So for example, they'll have an extra one semester, or the next semester they have 1 or 2 time slots where they can add in a prereq. We put in a prereq. In terms of the gap year goes in and out of popularity, but what I want to stress about the gap year is that it's really, who are you, where are you at in your life, and what do you want for you? Because you can take a gap year and you can have an external experience, you add it to your resume, you learn more about what it is you want, and sometimes the gap year actually helps you get into the graduate program that you want to go to, pending what you were doing.
I couldn't agree more. I think that we've talked about it. If any of you have ever spoken to others who have attended an admissions interview, if you've taken some time, perhaps your background is in an unrelated field, or you haven't really had a lot of experience in your desired interest area, this might be a great opportunity for you to make the best use of that time. And I think you gain so much, as Ilana has shared, during that gap year, and you become a much more rounded candidate for that. So please keep in mind that when they are looking at the application submissions, yes, your GMAT or your GRE scores or your LSAT scores, wherever those may be, are of importance, but so are other elements to your background. So please consider that if that's something that really would be instrumental. If you're not sure if you'll need one of those, utilize an opportunity to speak to someone on the career advising team or an academic advisor to best flush that out. Don't look at it as a negative. I think oftentimes people might perceive that to be a negative, but there are occasions where it can be definitely spin, and it can be a positive for you. So now we wanted to just share with you the graduate school timeline. And oftentimes when you look at this, the impression is that you only need about 6 months. So I do want to, preface by saying that this is only merely showing you a highlight. For some of you, I would encourage you, if you are earlier in your academic careers, whether you are a sophomore or a junior, take the time to start planning this out. Because in addition to planning out the actual application process, we should be thinking about what your extracurricular activities have entailed, what your course projects have entailed to substantiate your credentials for applying to these programs. So in the 4 to 6 months before the deadline, once you've done adequate research in identifying the programs of interest, again, I can't stress enough, utilizing Canvas, utilizing, sites, external sites such as US News and World Report, speaking to admissions representatives at Yeshiva University. As you know, we have many graduate programs that are also available at the university. Speak to admissions representatives there as well. Even if you're not considering one of our programs, they are very welcoming and answering questions, and you might surprise yourself. You might find that one of the programs is really well suited for you there as well. So the first thing you want to do, and just so everyone is clear, this timeline, I know some of you may be taking screenshots of this. We are going to there is a checklist that it will be available on our Canvas page. For those of you that have not joined our Canvas page, I encourage you to do so. There will be a QR code coming up in the next slide for it, but there is a checklist of this timeline that I encourage you to download and utilize when you need it. But the first thing is determining that professional goal, as we have gone over this evening, researching the institutions and the programs, when determining which ranking is of preferred interest depending on your preferred program of interest, deciding location, etc., is also very important. You want to request information and reading material. Now, many of these things may be accessible with just a click away and you get an email back, and it may not require you to wait for anything in the mail, but things that you need to consider are preparation for the admissions exams. And oftentimes, although we want to say we want to take them, 6 months before, for some of us, with all the coursework that you're balancing, there may be occasions when you want to probably practice a little bit longer. Perhaps you need to take that exam more than once. Those are factors to consider. Also, when thinking about the admissions exams, taking into consideration that some of them may be hosted on a Saturday and you need specific accommodations to be made. You want to make those accommodations in advance. You want to make plans to finance that education. So you do want to explore those scholarships, those loan programs, looking into assistantships and fellowship opportunities. Those are not as widely accessible. They are competitive, but I do encourage you to explore those as early as possible. 2 to 3 months out, you want to finalize that list of graduate programs that you have an interest in. You want to establish connections with the potential schools, visit and interview if possible. The beauty of being in the environment that we are in now, which is remote, is your accessibility to potential alumni, to potential admissions representatives sooner. So I encourage you to explore that. The draft of that statement of purpose and application essay, that's where the most critical amount of time will take. I've spoken to many students in the past, and I'm sure, Liana, you have as well, is that it takes time to really craft why you want to go into this program and what contributions you might be able to make and what does your background say. So, don't take that for granted. Oftentimes it's not one draft. It may take many iterations. Okay, so I do encourage you to begin that early. Contact professors and mentors, start thinking about this, not 2 to 3 months before, but even beforehand. If you have already thought about this and you are in your second or third year, if you've already graduated, start reconnecting with those professors to say, I took your class, a semester ago, 2 semesters ago. You need to remind them what it was like when you were in their class, what project you worked on, because they have a lot of students that they work with as well. You want to take the exam, you need to request official transcripts, you need to complete many elements of the application. There may be the primary application, there may be some secondary applications, and then a month before you really are gathering those letters of recommendation. You're polishing up that essay, that personal statement and application. You need to continue exploring the financial planning that you may need to take into account for this. You want to submit that application before the deadline if possible. Some schools do have rolling admissions, but I do encourage you, create an Excel spreadsheet for yourself and sort of identify the programs of interest, the dates for applications to be due, what are the supplemental materials that they need? Do they need a resume? Do they need a personal statement? Do they need more than 3 letters of recommendations, less than 3 letters of recommendation? Do they need not just one personal statement, but some secondary materials? So really explore that early on. And then you want to follow up to receive confirmation of the application. Your test scores, you need the correct number of where it's being routed to. Okay, you need to take care of those things a month before. Again, this timeline is available on our Canvas shell. So I do encourage you to download that. And This video will be available on our YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed to it, I encourage you to explore it. We can be found on YouTube. It is the Yeshiva University Career Center page. You want to explore that. And then tonight's slides will be available via this QR code. I've been mentioning our Canvas page multiple times this evening. You know, we have resources across all the majors at the university on the undergraduate level. We do touch upon each of the graduate programs that would coincide with these. Again, do not feel compelled to only look at the ones that are related to the major that you pursued in your undergraduate background. I just want to be very mindful of that for you all this evening. And then in addition to that, we have other supplemental materials that you'll find in there. At the very top of the page, you'll find our Career Center resources, which will include the timeline along with a handout that corresponds to applying to graduate schools. And, you know, that is our portion of it. We'd like to open it up this evening to the students that have joined us to share your thoughts, any questions that you might have that we have not addressed.
Sharon, I just want to tell you all, I just want to remind everybody that the students who often take the summer, we do work through the summer. A lot of you don't know that. Take advantage of us in the summer. Take a summer to put your application together and speak with the Career Center as well as an academic advisor. We can help you. And also, I just wanted to mention that with your personal statement, it's your chance to interview, it's who you are, and it's something that they can't see in a number or a letter grade. And also, don't forget on your resume to show them that you go outside of our community. In other words, you're not just with YU, not that that's bad, but you also volunteer everywhere and anywhere, everywhere. Homeless shelters, women's shelters, animal shelters, you name it. Okay.
Okay.
Nachum.
You feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, a quick question. So what is a good strategy for, so there's like so many options sometimes for graduate schools. Like there's just so many. I know we mentioned like a lot of different factors of trying to decide, but I guess you sort of touched on it, but like how to eliminate, you know, some of the options, because there's so many that it's like becomes hard to know, like what should your top choices be? Because like if you research all the schools, it's gonna take you forever, you know, because there's so many choices. So how do you like eliminate some of those options?
For sure. That's a good question. I think each of us might have something to share about it, but what I can say is, you know, I think one of the things that you should take into account is kind of making a list for yourself of what are some of the things that you want, some of the things that you need out of a program, you know, whether that is a small class size, whether the cost is a factor for you, whether there's specific research that's happening at that institution that you want to be a part of. You know, I think those factors are really important. So you should be thinking about these factors both on a social level, you know, is there a community, a Jewish community near me? How is housing around there? What does safety look like? And then from an academic perspective, thinking about, you know, what does the cohort look like at this institution, right? And what is the research and the study that they have there? What are the faculty working on? Because you can see a lot of this research available publicly. So I think that might be something to take into consideration when you're weighing those pros and cons about each individual school. And size is really critical. So I think that helps us narrow the scope as well. One of the things that we were discussing previously is that unlike undergraduate education, where you go into the rankings and you see, you know, top schools for liberal arts, top schools for this, depending on your interest area, the graduate rankings vary greatly. You know, independent of business schools, law, particularly, or medical school, when you're thinking about these subspecialties, right? If we're thinking about psychology, PhD versus PsyD, there's a lot of variation in that one. When we're thinking about counseling, you know, there's a myriad of variations in them. So you really need to take into account what specialty you might be thinking about, which model makes the most sense, you know, whether we're talking about a practitioner model, a theoretical model, and then ultimately working backwards, what do you ultimately want to do? What are people that are in the profession of choice doing? What does their background look like? You know, if you want to go into, and I know in your particular case it's psychology, but anybody else that wants to go into any other discipline, thinking about that. Oftentimes, I think we think about things in a linear way, but you can be, as we've shared, and I think most people will look at people on our own team. Our director of advising is also a practicing attorney, but he's working in higher education. I mean, there's a lot of variation in it, but I think going back to your original question, you have to think about what are the things that you want, what are the things that you need out of a program to help you sort of narrow the scope a little bit, because it will be wide. Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
SJ?
So I was wondering, is it pretty much set for every industry that if you go to grad school, you are significantly likelier to make more money, or are there some industries where it really doesn't make a difference?
That's a very good question. I think there's variation with that, to be quite honest with you. In each of the guides that we've prepared for students, we talk a little bit about salary expectation. A really great tool that we encourage students to utilize, which is what we utilize, is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It comes straight from the U.S. Department of Labor. And so depending on your industry sector, it is a factor to consider. There are cases where experience supersedes education, and the salary gap will dictate that. Okay, so if we're talking about the creative fields, for example, when you think about that, experience sometimes will trump that degree, but there's a shift going on with that. So I think just you need to kind of do a little bit of research with that. There are specific disciplines where it is necessary, and the graduate degree will necessitate, right, the cost of your salary. It will increase the cost of that salary. But you have to keep in mind that some professions, to execute the function of that profession, you can't do so without a master's degree or a PhD otherwise. So you really have to take into consideration what you ultimately want to do. I think the one variation is when we're talking about something in the creative space. Okay, but if we're talking about going into education, going into counseling, any of those fields specifically, without talking about the obvious ones like law, medicine, or healthcare, we have to kind of work backwards and look at the title that you're hoping to achieve, doing that due diligence of networking with people that are in those current titles, maybe even exploring job postings for the fields of interest, right? To really see what are they requesting. Are they asking in the preferred or the required qualifications for that master's degree? And if you're seeing a shift in that, then that is telling you that the compensation is correlating back to that. So it's being really mindful of those job postings. I mentioned creativity because I know we've spoken in the past about the field, but that is something to consider. Anyone else have a question?
Question. So I'm in my senior year and I'm kind of getting like nervous about deadlines. So I know that obviously each program is different and they have their own deadlines, but is there like a general time where I should like start like applying for like the programs? Like, is there like a specific month that maybe that would have more things due?
Can you share with us a little bit about, you mentioned you're a senior, what area are you thinking about going into? Because that might help us answer this a little better.
Yeah, I'm a psychology major and I'm looking to do like social work.
Okay, so I think a big factor, and Eliana, do you want to take this, or I can as well?
I mean, I can first tell you that every school that you're interested in will have a website with an application timeline. And if you want to apply for this fall, I imagine things will open up soon. I know right now I have several pre-law students. We are putting our applications in the next 4 weeks, and they're hoping to go this coming fall. But I just stress, go online to these schools. It should all be there.
Is there like a list of like schools that like graduate, like alumni have gone to from Stern?
So the way that you want to probably explore this is probably I would say going back onto LinkedIn. If you haven't joined Yeshiva University's LinkedIn page and looking at the alumni from that perspective, you can certainly meet with one of the advising members and we can show you how to do a detailed search. But just to address the initial point, right? So oftentimes if you think about what it was like on the undergraduate side, you were thinking about applying in the fall, which means you have to work backwards. When are you taking those entrance exams? The finance piece is really critical. Some schools are very stringent about their incoming class, meaning that the class joins fall of each year as opposed to fall spring. And so if you're thinking about next fall as an entry point, then you really should be thinking about when is that entrance exam going to be taken and when would you be preparing for it? And then thinking about the submission of that actual application. So if they're restrictive in saying that their entering class joins in the fall of the following year, for example, then they might have a hard and fast rule, depending on school, of all materials in by fall so that you're notified in spring for the following fall. But there are institutions that are on a rolling basis, right? But that's really what that means, is that they are reviewing them on an ongoing basis, but they're also filling their seats on an ongoing basis. So there is that possibility that you might apply, you meet the cut because in terms of the deadline, but that necessarily might not mean that you get a seat in the cohort, because it depends on how many seats they might have. So I think it really comes down to that. Now, to address your point about where have alumni gone on to, I think if you go on Yeshiva University on the LinkedIn page, you can do an alumni search and you can further explore what areas they've studied on an undergraduate basis, what they're doing currently as an entry point. But if you're exploring just graduate programs as a whole, I've sort of emphasized the fact that you want to use US News and World Report. That's where sort of you can find ranking information on a graduate level. You can do the subspecialties to understand for the areas of interest what you want to do. It breaks it down even further than that. Now, there may be some limitations in there in terms of what you can see without having a paid subscription. I can't speak to that in great detail, but you do want to sort of have a starting point there. But I would say, before delving in that direction, especially if you're not particularly sure, again, and I don't mean to be, harping on the same stone talking about our Canvas page, but we've done some research already based on these areas on each of our guides for you. And it'll at the very least emphasize for you what is available in-house at YU that you might consider having a conversation with someone on the admissions team there about our programs. And then we also tell you, here are some other top ranked programs to explore in addition to these sites that will take you to the other programs. So, so you're not kind of going into this endless space about which program should I be exploring. I would say start there. At the very least, if you do anything tonight, go back to that QR code. These slides will be available. And I'll go back there in a second, so if anyone needs to scan it, but go back there so that you at the very least scan that, go to the ones that correspond to your areas of interest and start exploring there. But, to Eliana's point, you really need to go to each school's individual site because things are changing. Some schools are rigid in their admissions process, but there is a possibility that things are changing now because of what we're experiencing right now. There may be more of an influx of people choosing not to go into the workforce and are choosing to go into a graduate program, not operating out of fear, but truthfully, they were thinking about it all along, and this just feels like the right time to do it. And so really, it's something that you need to really consider, Kara. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Can I just say that also a good point is to check, is to not assume that, I don't know if you guys could agree or disagree, but some of the schools now are not requiring like GREs and things like that for this upcoming year. So like maybe don't assume that you necessarily need an entrance exam and double check, because like I didn't necessarily double check all the schools. I just sort of assumed that I would need the GRE. So I started studying for it. And now a lot of the PsyD programs are not requiring it. So I'm still trying to take it, but I'm just saying, but like you might not need a huge test. So it's like a good thing to double check.
Yeah, that is true. Thank you so much for sharing that, because there is a shift happening. Again, I think because of what we're experiencing, again, just to note, because of the climate that we're in, there is sort of this influx happening. They're looking for ways to engage with people who otherwise weren't their target audience at one point. You are now their target audience, perhaps. And so it is advantageous for you to go on each individual site. Again, I can't tell you enough how important it is going to be to organize yourselves, create an Excel spreadsheet with the individual schools of interest, what their specific requirements are. That might also help for those of you that have a very long list of 200 plus, schools, and narrowing it down to 20. The other piece that you want to have in those columns, which I think is really critical that we didn't stress upon, is the fact that, some of these applications cost a certain amount of money. And so when you factor all that in, you're investing in yourself. Just always think about it from that perspective. But how much can you invest, right? Can you do upwards of, $400, or can you do upwards of more? Each school has their own fee scale, but that's a really great point there, because the exam itself is a cost associated with it too. Anyone else?
I have one more question.
Of course.
I know we're going on break for a little while, so I'm assuming that everything's closed, right? Like the career center and stuff like that.
No, we're not. We're open.
Oh, okay, awesome. Because I really want to make an appointment.
Nope, we are open. Both academic advising, we're still here. So, if you guys have time during your break and you feel like you need to have further dialogue with academic advising or the career center, I encourage you to reach out to us.
Yeah, I definitely want to meet with someone and talk about my
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we have great colleagues, and you can talk to us too, but there's great people on each team that you can talk to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. SJ, you have a question?
Yeah, one last question. So there's a lot of these quizzes that you can take to assess what's the right college major for you. I was wondering if you find quizzes, well, two-part question. One, are there quizzes like that for what's the right graduate school program for you? And if there are, do you think those are accurate?
I can't speak to knowing of a particular, quiz or assessment tool. Let's, just to be really transparent with you, that will tell you which is the right program. If you talk to anyone on the advising team, or even if you speak to your individual academic advisor, I would say that the question really stems from, what do you ultimately want to do? Where do you see yourself? It's a conversation. It's an ongoing conversation, talking about, where your strengths lie. What do you ultimately want to do before making that decision? I know if you're kind of unsure, I think that's your originating point. I wouldn't tell you to look at any of these assessment tools. What they might tell you is, what are some areas that you could excel in? There's only one book that I'm familiar with that, we've used in the past, which is called What Color is Your Parachute, that you might consider exploring. But again, it's not intended to be sort of the go-to to make your ultimate decision. It'll just tell you with this personality type, people that are successful in these industries, sectors are these, and this is what the job looks like. But it may not really fulfill everything. It'll tell you, why they're happy in these fields. And then you might decide, I could be happy with that or not. But I would say if you're still really torn about it, have conversations with us, have conversations with people that are close to you. Talk to people who might be doing things that you have an interest in doing, so that you can further listen to, what do they enjoy about the job? What are some perceivable challenges? How have things changed in this current climate that we're in with their professions? Because, a lot has changed. What was once the norm is shifting, and we, I hate to use the coin phrase, but we are in a new normal right now. We're all adapting to it, and every profession is making accommodations for it. So I know, SJ, in your case, if you want to talk to anyone on the team, I would say do that before you sort of either spend money or embark on looking into anything. But, I can send you, or you can talk to anyone else on the team, some books that we might recommend. But there's no one tool. I want to be clear with everyone. There isn't an assessment tool that tells you this is the right program for you. It's a very personal choice, and it's based on fit, and I wouldn't take it lightly. All of our material tells you that graduate school is an investment in yourself. It can be a costly investment, both in time and finances. And so before you embark on that, I say have all these exploratory conversations beforehand.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And if you're not sure what program to go to, make sure you take some classes. I have several students who thought they were going one direction and they took another class and it changed their completely changed their perspective. And also don't forget the CUNY system versus the private schools. You have incredible opportunity right now.
Anyone else? Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. You know, we really appreciated this. We were hoping to have a good show, and I think, you know, your questions were great, and this was, to us, this was a really good show. So we'll talk to you guys soon. Feel free to reach out to us at your convenience. And I'm just gonna go back on the screen here one moment so you can see the QR code once again. For those of you that haven't taken out your phones, please, you know, pull this, you know, go to our pages and explore it further. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.